it is upon the responsibility on all of us, and I really want to empower the kids from the dominant caste as much as I'm concerned about the oppressed caste people, because it is a project of a humanity, and I don't use humanity for the sake of gender knowledge competition. Humanity means a lot, and when we can only realize that when Dev Pathak and Suraj Yengde are sharing the space, not to overpower each other, but to
Yeah.
complement each other.
So the text has become wildfire, so to say. But while reading the text itself, a reader, a student, any scholar in India or beyond India who is interested in issues related to Indian society would also see various moments of subtexts in the book.
Yeah.
So subtext is not that very well known. So what is unknown? What is that subtext which you think you would like to share with us to begin with?
About this text, and I'm so glad you asked this question about the subtext. I think there is, and I think this is where Derrida as a interlocutor will help us, because how do we engage with the text? That text is in front of you, but also the text that is wandering in your mind.
Right.
And personally, I wanted this text to be engaging in a way that it will offer your imaginative anchors many more locations to foreground. So it's not just a text written in ABC to Z, but it has much more musical notes in it. If one wants to find out, and as you would appreciate that that it was. I mean, as many of us do, we work on a project for so long that sometimes you kind of have a limited grasp on this on your own topic, because sometimes you are like as is always the case, your eyes are so used to your ideas, and so for me to develop this thesis into a public announcement, it was necessary that we allow public to also go and echo the notes and the messages, which is not just limited to you and I as a reader, but you, I, and the many people who are not reader yet, but we could possibly recruit them as readers, not just of the text, but the tradition of textuality, which means let's engage. Let's try to go back to this, this original idea of this democratic sangha, where or even the Socratic tradition of let's have this kind of a mini stadium of ideas. Let's not just create more gladiators, and I think it was very intentional, and I'm personally very happy that it worked out. Like it has generated a public participation, and it continues.
One of the internal criticism of academic practices is precisely this, that we have been speaking in echo chambers with our peers. We understand each other, but our voices, whatever our finding, our narratives, our arguments don't reach out to the people for whom it is meant. So therefore, that I at public is something, I suppose this is coming of age in academic practices. I don't see too many takers as yet in India, but I'm sure at some point of time there would be certain kind of somersault.
And this is what I was engaging with the Oxford Philosophical School. I mean, one of the remains like the vanguard of still the practice. So I was talking to some logicians, and their defense was, why do you want to generalize abstract ideas? And I buy that. I don't even want to reduce the importance of, philosophical abstractness, artistic abstractness. You know what I mean? And so, so I am promiscuous in this way when it engages with disciplines. I am not monogamous. It has to have a relationship of multitudes, but not just relationship, but partnership. I need to, and then so and because the demand of public is so intense, and sometimes the people I write about, they have very strict demands, and if you at all try to play or border around that, and if they can't understand it, you are immediately held accountable for that. And so it's the fate of any writer who has
Right.
written a text. It's like Proust, relevant of time, yeah, but more relevant because and I think literature has really given us kind of a solace and for me, whenever I get this kind of delimiting responses from anywhere, and they come with all shades and colors. I always think of writers of the bygone era, whom we are appreciating only later. But again, I have a very much like Martin Luther King Jr. said, he doesn't have a complex of martyrship. We want to celebrate the life when we are alive. We don't want to be having going to the tomb and offering respects.
So, no, I totally appreciate this idea. I have been personally a believer of that intellectual promiscuity, even though there are too many gatekeepers around who would not allow you to be promiscuous, men, women, gay, lesbian. That training in intellectual promiscuity is something which we have found conspicuous by absence in academic setup. But nevertheless, some of us, few and far between, try to practice it. I was coming to that part with yet another kind of formulation about the public demand, which you rightly said, beyond a point, it's very difficult to dilute everything that we gather from our very conceptual, theoretical, philosophical engagements. Everything cannot be diluted. However, in the meantime, one has to be conscious of the fact that we are talking to public at large and not only between ourselves. So in that regard, I was thinking of checking out with you whether it's too much of demand or constraint for a scholar if the scholar also becomes a celebrity like yourself.
Dave, to be very honest with you, and I'm sure you will appreciate that as well. A scholar lives in his or her world. It's like a poet, and you are convinced and convicted about. Like, for example, I was reading Edward Said's. There's a biography of him, and somebody wrote a review. Actually, Adam Schatz for London Review of Books, and Said was a great Palestinian activist and scholar. But and that is the fate of not only him. You talk about any intellectuals whose ideas got accepted by the public. They always were trying to find for their collegial space. You might go to a public space and address 10,000 people, inspires them, offer some ideas to the coattail of certain ends, but you are seeking that scholarly robustness. Unfortunately, Dave, what is happening is our younger generations, we are unable to divorce them from the phenomenology of the poverty of emotion. One doesn't know how to be emotional. They are being reaction in that process of being reaction. I'm not saying reactionary. They are just being in the process of reaction. And they have not even achieved the status of reactionary or being underhanded. And so they are somewhere in this limbo. And I think we need to tell our students that there is a capacity of knowledge, where knowledge can unite us, but also create a democratic space of some sort, right? And with me, I always enjoy the company of scholarly people, because the point is, and I always try to tell myself that, there is a field and there is a subfield. The primary field remains the commitment to scholarship. And commitment to scholarship comes in various forms. It can be a text of a certain nature, which is written in its own esoteric sense, but the value of that text doesn't diminish. And I'm a great lover of Foucault, and I love he deals with the many people don't like Foucault for various reasons, but and that's what I said. The promiscuity is very essential. Now the point is, we are regressively attached to what Eric Hobsbawm critiqued vociferously on the idea of tradition. What is tradition? But we really espouse it as if it's a given thing, and then we develop on that tradition as a citational index. You know what I mean? But
Right.
guess what? That tradition might have a lacuna, or the tradition might not even have departed from where you would like that that thing to progress. So we need to now create the metaphysics of our own emotions. What we do is we have created a phantom of our emotions, and that's like really operating like a dread, like a fear. And for me, Dave, to be very precise, it's difficult because the general public demands. Now let me tell you, for 4 years, now it has not stopped entirely, but people still tell me, why do I write such difficult English? And that's that's like, yeah, but then I can't arrogantly tell them, go and read properly. You know what I mean? Like, you ought to be respectful to that emotion as well. And one of the loveliest part of being working in academic space or in public sphere, the kind of merging is that we are trying to tear down the walls, and I'm sure we all do in our own essence, the kind of high gates and high towers and sitting in a specific location, and by doing that, sometimes the public, and I've been always telling, the public mentality is always conservative. Public has not matured to become liberal, or it doesn't have a firm ideological base. Tomorrow, their party goes and convinces about certain idea of certain ways. The public who is willing to listen will follow. And that's why we have such a superstitious mass, because it remains tied to conservatism, yet it doesn't fully own that up. And that's why we have the enigmas of today's failure. So in a way, one has to find a way where do you want to see yourself, but also where are your responsibilities. And it's very difficult, especially coming from a Dalit community, where there is it's not an imaginative historical past that we have to construct and write about. It's like very much alive. It's in front of you. So
Yes.
I always think that as an interlocutor of this moment, what best can I do? Because it's literally writing a war history, being the participant of that, being a soldier somewhere in at the sideline, sometimes in the front. So it's the long response to your interesting question, Dave, is it's not easy because the accountability and checks are very fine. If you write an academic journal text, not many people will read, but it will have its posterity. It will have its and critique will happen in the same academic decency. Unlike here, Twitter, social media, other forums, people will just, reduce you to the level where even you have not imagined that you belong there.
Right. So in my original plan as well, I had an idea of, coming to the tradition question, and tradition question essentially connected with the idea of Brahmanism. Mm-hmm. I'm saying idea of Brahmanism, which also attracts you a lot, it seems. Not in that traditional sense, or you tend to take that idea of Brahmanism to various other realms as well. I'm sure you're still in the process of thrashing it out, and something I sincerely believe that the concept of Brahmanism has to be made more critical and more nuanced, so as we could understand how we are surrounded in our nooks and corners by this, how much dominant this idea is. So coming to the question of tradition, I was thinking, I understand the critique of tradition, but in the meanwhile, one is also informed by someone like A.K. Ramanujan, who would like to look at tradition as something in continuum.
Yeah.
And then one also finds out from the cultural history of various parts of India that tradition also provided space to call out the buffoonery of Brahmins, the caste Brahmins.
That's right.
The cultural subversion of Brahmanism also happens within that tradition. It's another thing that the colonial encounter or some other kind of motivation made the indigenous scholars erase some of those subversive part. That is another story.
Yeah.
But the tradition also entails that element, and therefore we find a group of chamar raps or similar kind of very contemporary Dalit orchestration in performative forms coming to us in Maharashtra Dalit Sairi, and even in some of the old performances in Maharashtra, we have heard of the interjections of caste critique, so and so forth. So, do you think at the level of our engagement, we need to rethink the idea of tradition? Should we call it? Should we just unmask it and trash it, or there should be some more discovery of tradition so as to find the legitimacy for the cultural critique that scholar like you are have started to offer?
One of the impactful ideas of tradition is that it offers us a starting point. It has not offered us an end point. And if you're in the process of finding a starting point, my reservations of that reliance is that it might not necessarily be acceptable to today's culture. And that's why I remain defiant to present culture. I'm a flamingo of ideas. I like to fly ideas and migrate to different worlds and survive there and travel elsewhere. Because it's the very purpose of any scholarship to survive. Scholar might die, but how do we? And in that, to uphold certain tradition is a process of knowledge making. Now, I might disagree with that. It doesn't mean I need to be invalidated. Unless, of course, there is and this is the question of how do we then procure a literature of atrocity or celebration of atrocity. Similarly, the Nazism or fascism that brings forth, or even any forms of violence that invokes. I think they are historical records, but the same is used as a tradition by certain people, and that's why we have this Proud Boys or right-wing research across the world, because the attachment to tradition has come from a different directory, not the same directory that A.K. Ramanujan, for example, would propose. And as excellent scholar as he is, within the same phase. And I think I would rather fly with the idea that in India, tradition is not definitely a uniform concept. And if we are willing to acknowledge it's extremely heterogeneous, and it might even break the heads of each other.
True.
If you walk with it, then there's no. I mean that's what it is. That's what it is. The point is, if I look at my tradition, it stands very much contradictory and opposed to the Brahminic values, which is basically cheat, deceit, plagiarizing, and eventually eliminating that will produce a very much a Charvak type of rationalist ethic, or in modern context the Buddhist ethos that Ambedkar so eloquently recovered for all of us. And I think if you work through that, My question even to Dalits is there. When we talk about tradition, we need to account to what would that mean, as opposed to or as independent of Brahminism. Did we exist apart from Brahminism? And I think we did exist. Brahminism is not uh, a concept that was developed in Big Bang. It is very much a manifestation of what was versed out there, and what was versed in you, and which produced a very nihilistic model for anyone. It's like this dark air that will engulf you, and for us, what we need to do in this case is look through the lens of the most fragile. How are they surviving? I mean, this is the basic rule, right? If you have a nuclear catastrophe, what you will do is you will look at the plant that still is green. Like what's happening to you? Dalits are like those green plants who are locked in multiple nuclear catastrophes. And if you understand their reason of survival, you might get very much humanistic values. These are simple values, what I call the fortification of love, the idea of morality, ethics, shield, which very much is elemental to your thinking, and that's why I propose the idea of humor, how we find notions of love, and very much not necessarily Freudian humor, but a humor as a rejection and as well as rustication of immediate apathy. So there are various ways we need to. What we have done is we have just looked at tradition through one or two lenses. This binarism has created problem, and that's why this other ethics that we see, that the subtext, to go back to your question,
Yes.
is what I'm trying to record, or else it will become this warring part, which is true, but also there were many lives underneath. Can we accept them as tradition? If we do, then we will have to rewrite and rethink, and I think that's a good process.
Wonderful. So there is another thing which may seem quite provocative, but I'm sure I can share with you. I can't share with many of my Dalit friends in India. They really get upset with this. But even as a student, some decades ago, I used to think as to how is it possible that despite so much of systematic criticism which have emerged from not only scholars in universities, also public intellectuals.
Yeah.
At several epochs in history, we find our leadership, some of the conscious leadership, has always given us very robust, convincing critique of Brahmanism in various forms all around us. And yet, Brahmanism has been that kind of monster which has acquired many more heads.
Yeah.
It has not been decimated in spite of the sustained criticism and our awareness. Even sometimes I find that even ordinary people are aware of the delimiting impacts of Brahmanic values. And yet, nobody is able to overcome it. So how is it possible that this is far, it has such longevity, far more longevity than those other kind of values which can make us better humans?
One of my attempts is to make people realize in the quality of their humanity, not necessarily their upbringing. The part of the problem with dominant caste kids is they are being bred in a very self-suffocating, self-doubt, pessimistic way. And to express their frustration, they find the easiest target. And it happens to be a Adivasi, a Dalit, or even a Shudra with certain, and women become the centralizing targets of that. And I think it is upon the responsibility on all of us. And I really want to empower the kids from the dominant caste as much as I'm concerned about the oppressed caste people, because it is a project of a humanity. And I don't use humanity for the sake of gender knowledge competition. Humanity means a lot. And when we can only realize that when Dev Pathak and Suraj Yengde are sharing the space, not to overpower each other, but to complement each other.
Yeah.
But to come from a tradition, acknowledging that there has been, records of this. And I think, um, when we tie this to a neoliberal modes of, interactions, it gets more complicated. Like, Nelson Mandela was not wrong when he was proposing a reconciliation in South Africa after apartheid. There was something very important, but we can't tell that to a hungry person. We need to tell that to, we can't tell that to a miner who is going deep down the earth several kilometers. We need to tell that to the mine owner. We need to tell that to the person who's owning the farm, and for in our case, we have far often been told the values we already uphold, like be nice to each other. We already are nice. Dalits have been nice. If they are not nice, I will be tell they will create civil wars. They have not taken arms. The moral science lessons: do not steal. They don't steal. They don't have resources to steal. It is the Brahmin Banyas, the Malyas, and the Modis. The idea of don't mock anyone. Nobody mocks anyone for the sake of it's you who mocks. You call names and denigrate. So and what I want to do is I want the Savarna community to start an anti-caste revolution in their own spaces. And for that, if I can help in any way, I want to offer my help, but I think that dialogue of reconciliation can only happen when enough work is done on the other side of the puddle, if you will.
So I understand that you have no interest in taking the Freudian route, but there was this basic Freudian principle on which a lot of psychoanalysis happened at one point of time, which was this idea of internalizing the values of the oppressor. The oppressed always tends to internalize the values of the oppressor. I need not go to the society to really exemplify it. Even in university setup, we see that all of those who would be lower in the hierarchy, after a while, and the similar kind of hierarchy as it is in caste structure. Even in university setup, there would be this idea of purity and pollution, and those who are lower in hierarchy, ordinary teachers, they would aspire one day to become one of those techno-managerial professor, and then they will acquire the same values and they will try to oppress those who are lower in the hierarchy. So, which means that there is, the Brahminic values have seeped into various modern systems. And many of the Dalit intellectuals are also part of the modern system. Do you think they also tend to internalize the values of oppressor, and there is some sort of, I'm just trying to provoke some ideas, is there some sort of Dalit Brahmanism also at play, which does not let the Brahminic values come down from the pedestal?
Gabriel Tarde, the French writer and thinker, had written about the idea of imitation. And Ambedkar takes that idea very forward, especially in his essay Caste in India, 1916. And he brings about,
yes.
And he literally says Dalits are, the idea of endogamy is not necessarily, it's like someone, and I think that's a very important argument as to we operate in the imitation of the society's influential people, and this convolution of at what point of time do you not identify it as just not an imitation, but it's your own internal self that is projecting, that was waiting for that space to grant you. And this goes to the evolutionary theory. I mean, every species wants to be dominant because you are to survive, and there are various reasons for you want to be dominant. In the Dalit context, that thing has not happened yet because they have just began. The Dalit is second, third generation maximum who has gotten into it, and they are not yet given the space to imitate others, because for you to effectively aspire to somebody, you really need your faculties to be on your side. Mental and physical faculties. Right now, they are just trying to merely survive, and institutional spaces continue to be more harming their development. It's and in India, it's another wretched Brahminic system of feudalism, where your dean and your HOD becomes apparently the big shot, and That's just, in Western countries, that's just that's an important position, but that's also an administrative extra role. Many people, serious scholars, don't opt to it. They say, I want to write book instead of doing this. But, in India, this is kind of a bureaucratic academization that has happened. And for one to really, emulate Brahminism, they cannot necessarily affect that, because Brahminism is not accessible to them. If I can emulate a certain culture, if I have dipped myself into it, I can provide that knowledge once I have swam in that waters. Right now, it is always living on the margins, so they can't even get anywhere close to Brahminic dictions, Brahminic values, for that to then take and then imitate. What they do is they live in protest, and within the protest there are various reactions one get. Sometimes they are self-destructive. Sometimes they are, one can assess that, and this is the condition of fallibility, where one is ready to put itself on any altar and come in a different shape. And for Dalits to be Dalit Brahmins, it will take some time. We cannot, having said that, we cannot declare that that is a possibility that is only accessible to Dalits. That is also facility accessible to lower caste Brahmins. And I think, there is a study. So, for example, Brahmins have 1,550 subcastes, and among them there are various subcastes. And for especially UP context, Trivedi, Dvedi,
Yes.
Dubey, and I was actually talking to a Trivedi, and he was a really proud Trivedi. He was not proud Brahmin, because, and then he told me the necessity of why, and he apparently, of course, married a lower caste Brahmin, and there was a revolt in family. And so what is happening is, even those Brahminic values are not accessible to the subaltern, if you will, or lower caste Brahmins who are living on the poor scale. Because as you can see, the merchant caste Brahmins, for example, on the western Maharashtra side, especially Saraswats, right? They have a very closed door association. And so what we need to do in this case to understand is, has Brahminism managed to percolate within Brahmins who don't have access to the tradition of resources and power? Our critique becomes a poor Pandit who has no access to other resources but to work in temple and make the money out of it. But the actual critique has to be the ones who are not Pandits, but enjoying the privilege of Pandits. And in this case, the lower caste Brahmin tries to emulate the upper caste Brahmins in their exercise, and that's why they become the most hated element of the Brahmins, right? And the elite Brahmins come to Oxford or go to Harvard. You understand what I mean? And another thing, unless and until we share that information and the accessible resources. So for Dalits to effect any form of self-destructive ideologies or even praxis, I think it will take some time for that to be totally internalized. And that internalization will take when we'll have an osmosis. At the moment, there's not much, right? I mean, you and I and few others will talk to each other. But on a society level, that still really is, you know what I mean, a very closed chamber.
So coming back to your stress on emotions, and probably with that we can draw closer to this wonderful conversation, is the idea of emotion. Probably it's high time we start understanding politics of emotion and understand as to how to really benefit this politics of emotion with right kind of questions as to what emotion matters. And related to the idea of emotion, as you rightly pointed out in the middle of your conversation, humor, the sense of humor, right? As to how to really laugh at something with each other. We have been in the habit of laughing at each other, which led scholars to talk about the speeches which can hurt each other, I mean, we know the trail, but then a new politics of emotion where we learn how to really laugh about things with each other, how to really work out such a politics, how to really think of this model of politics.
Human tendency is we laugh at stupidity. So we have to recognize caste is a stupid example. And a friend of mine who's a bureaucrat, Raju Shaktivel, he told me once, we should start a laughter protest movement. and he explained, he said, if somebody says, I'm a Brahmin, I'm upper caste, everybody should laugh. Like public, like go on public, like and so we need to organize a laughter conference, like bring out those laughable traits.
That's a very good idea. That's very good idea. Laughing conference would be respite from the kind of conferences that we are.
Exactly, and what I meant is, it's like one of those early morning exercises that my mom would go and try to laugh out, kind of. But these are like some of the traits which are totally fictional. Doesn't have a guarantee, doesn't have a shelf life for long. They need to be fleshed out and ironed out. What we do is we always see, for Brahmins to be superior, there has to be someone definitely on the other side of the pole, right? And that's why they are trying to make someone inferior. Because if there's no inferior, then they will lose the standing. And we need to then kind of pierce through that and really laugh out that. It should be like a joke if someone calls themselves superior based on, something of their birth. It should be stupid for someone to say that I am meritorious just because, and you are not because. It should be stupid for someone to tell I can produce good theories just because. We need to identify those laughable traits. And let me tell you, if everyone has that bone, and if you just massage it for some time, you might be able to identify that this is buffoonery. This is totally jocular. You can laugh out loud so many times that and we need to create something like a public repository of such jokes, so it becomes like a foolishness for one to espouse one's superiority, unless and until we do that. And that applies not just to caste, that applies to gender-based norms, sexuality-based norms, the transphobic kind of notions that we have, region-based. If we are able to do that, what we could do, then we should create, then that becomes an idea of self-respect. For my self-respect, let me not call myself as superior, because you know what, there will be howls of laughter, like people will literally, and they will laugh not to they will laugh to punish you. It's like a pointed laugh. So I think I've been thinking about since he told me like, we should laugh. I thought we should convene a conference of some like that, and also talk about how certain texts are really and I think that could be one of the ways to indirectly create a pressure amongst and that's not the only way. This is one of the, and people always say that's the part of being a scholar and being a public personality is people always take it as a final notion. I think we are experimenting. The idea of fallibility is very central to what we do. We don't claim an absoluteness, right? And people need to understand that certain ideas that we are proposing now could be changeable, could be objectionable in 10 years later, and let's embrace that instead of and so that's why Dave, I do this kind of thing. I become like subject of huge criticisms. I become subject of a lot of hatred and vicious kind of campaigns. But then I will do it because I think somebody has to do it. Everybody's bordering on the niceties. I'm not here for that.
So what are you experimenting with these days? This is the last part.
I'm actually working on 3 books now. That's why I'm one is the text on of course writing Ambedkar's biography. It's been like I've written half of it, but that man is he has so much in his life, especially public life, that I'm just having a little bit trouble going into that phase because people know already what he did at Southborough. There is a public record, but nevertheless I have to do that part of it. But second book is I'm writing on caste and internationalism, and how it is kind of working out. And there is this broader project. I'm co-working with Professor Kevin Brown on race and caste, and so this kind of this is my preoccupation with things, and people ought to realize that that's his forte. That's what he does. And I've always told, like, I'm not a caste scholar. I'm a lawyer, and then I went to social sciences. Now I'm going to history and all. But traditionally, I've not trained to read caste text. I read caste text out of interest, but eventually, after my training in African theory and migration, then I saw a kind of a gap that needed to be filled, and that's why I had to, and you would know this as well. When you something of a project you work for so long, and then you had to not abandon, but you have to leave aside to work for something that's urgent. So there is there is that kind of also in your mind that's still my field, that's my primary level of so people don't know that. People or critics don't know that. Rather, they just think some people read Ambedkar in the university. We read in the house. That's the difference. I have a certain idea that I want to take in future, and people will only realize it once the tree will bear fruits. And so we are the gardeners of this new saplings that are we are planting, and people might embrace you, people might reject you, but the real effort is how much strong can you be and continue. And I think that's the message also to other scholars who are promising to break the legs of each ideas and disciplines and scholarship and create something new.